There are multiple ways to look at organizational culture. In her book, published in 1992, Joanne Martin proposed three perspectives on organizational culture: an integrated perspective, a differentiated perspective, and a fragmented perspective. An integrated perspective looks for an umbrella culture that unifies an organizational culture. From this perspective, there is an overarching culture with artifacts, values, and assumptions that are common across organizational members. For example, here at SMU, an overarching ideal is that SMU is a private, world-class educational institution aiming to shape world changers. A differentiated perspective, another one, focuses on disagreements or differences that cause divisions within organizations. The particular interest is in the different subcultures within the overarching culture. Back to the SMU example, within our broader university culture, we may see several subcultures, such as faculty subculture versus student subculture, United Methodist subculture versus Catholic or non-religious subculture, Greek subculture versus independent student subculture. Each subculture has its own sets of artifacts, values, beliefs, language, or rituals that make them distinct from other subcultures within SMU. Lastly, a fragmented perspective, and the most challenging perspective to understand, focuses on the complexity of an organization, as expressed through ambiguity and inconsistency. Through this lens, there are certain issues within an organization that can be interpreted in so many different ways that a clear cultural understanding of them is lacking. For example, despite the common saying that every Mustang is valued, what it means exactly is probably questionable. As we've seen in the past few months, there have been attempts to address differentiated treatment of students based on their racial backgrounds here at SMU. Certainly, this situation is not unique to SMU, but happens at many universities nationwide. An inconsistency between explicit or implicit values and actual practices such as this is what scholars from the fragmented perspective are interested in. To sum up, you can look at an organizational culture from more than one angle, and using all of these three perspectives can give organizational members a more complete understanding of their organization's culture. Now, continue on with our multi-perspective discussion. There are 5 methods of analyzing organizational culture. These include script analysis, ritual analysis, metaphor analysis, reflective comment analysis, and ethnography. All of these methods lead to the same answer: the values and beliefs of the organization. They also follow similar steps with slightly different takes. Across all 5 methods, you will have to first gather data about the culture. You can do this by interviewing employees, observing how they talk to each other, spending some time within the organization, or researching the company's written materials. After the data collection stage, you will move to the data analysis stage, where you identify common themes, categorize them into groups, or count frequencies of occurrences. Finally, you draw a conclusion about the culture. The differences between these 5 methods are in the type of data that you collect. For script analysis, you are interested in the storytelling within the organization, including the myths, legends, or stories that are often told, and the heroes and villains within them. For ritual analysis, you examine formal or informal rituals of an organization. Formal rituals are, for instance, graduations, work anniversary recognition ceremonies, and annual picnics. Informal rituals include personal rituals, such as greeting people in the morning or sitting in a specific seat during meetings. For metaphor analysis, you compare the culture to another object, individual, or event that provides insight into the essence of the culture. For reflective comment analysis, you focus on the decision making of the organization to determine the rationales and values enacted by those decisions. Lastly, when you conduct an ethnography, you insert yourself into the organizational culture as a participant. Ethno is a Greek word meaning a race or a group of people, and graphy means writing. So ethnographers would spend some time within the organization, observing, participating in the organization's activities, making notes, and drawing a conclusion about the organization. Let's go back to Google and analyze its culture from these 5 different perspectives. If you are interested in script or narrative analysis, you'd be interested in the story of Google co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin and how they created a new search engine in their dorm room at Stanford University back in 1998, moved their operation to the garage of a friend who is now YouTube CEO, and expanded the company to its current location called the Googleplex. You would also pay attention to the story behind the slogan, "Don't be evil," which reflects Google's values of doing good things for the world. If you're interested in visual analysis, you would be tuning into Google's iconic Thanks God It's Friday meetings, where Google's leadership and employees meet on Fridays to openly discuss issues at the company. Or you may be interested in Google's unique job interview practices and how they customarily ask odd questions like, how many golf balls can fit in a school bus? If you are into metaphor analysis, you would identify metaphors that explain the psyche of Google employees, such as the Googlers as explorers, charting new territories, as I mentioned in the first part of this presentation. If you are into reflective comment analysis, you might find that Google employees try to make decisions that are aligned with their goals to make the world a better place through new technologies. Finally, if you are physically there at Googleplex conducting an ethnography, walking around and participating in the day-to-day operations along Google employees, you might see firsthand the espoused values of Google as well as some changing practices. You might observe a recent tension between the old slogan of "Don't be evil" versus the newly perceived assumption of "Don't ask me anything," as the new CEO Sundar Pichai cuts down their Thanks God It's Friday meetings from weekly to monthly and refrains from answering sensitive questions at those meetings. You might also find out that Google, the once happy workplace, has recently been struggling with their employee trust. As you can see here, all 5 methods of analysis provide a similar answer about values and beliefs shared by Google organizational members, but each dissects different dimensions. When using all 5 approaches, you gain a more nuanced understanding about the culture of this tech giant, a fun, unconventional group of explorers who relentlessly try to search for better answers through technologies, and a culture whose leaders and members are struggling to find a new shared meaning as their once revered transparency and slogan of "Don't be evil" are being questioned. Now that you have a better understanding about organizational culture, its importance for both organizational leaders and members, and the different ways to understand an organization's culture, what approach or approaches would you take to understand your current or future workplace? If you can start an organizational culture, what would it look like?